Have you ever looked at a dusty balcony, a dull porch, or even an empty windowsill and thought, well, this space is too small to grow anything? Most people do. But here's the truth, you don't need a yard, a shovel, or even good knees to start growing fresh herbs, colorful flowers, or even vegetables right where you are. What you do need is a little creativity. And a lazy gardener's secret that changes everything. Imagine this, you're sipping your morning tea, and just inches away, mint leaves you grew yourself are swaying gently in the breeze. You didn't dig. You didn't bend. You barely lifted a finger. Sounds impossible? That's exactly what Greta, a 72-year-old retiree with arthritis and a second-floor apartment, thought, until she found one simple way to turn leftover containers into thriving mini gardens. And the best part? She says her plants are the easiest friends she's ever had, no noise, no fuss, and they brighten her whole day. Stick around, because in just a moment, you'll discover how she transformed clutter into color. Using a trick even her grandkids now call grandma's magic pots. And if you think this isn't for you, wait till you see what she grew with just an old colander and a splash of rainwater. Greta never thought she'd miss dirt under her nails. At 72, she lived in a modest second-floor apartment in a quiet corner of Toledo. It wasn't fancy, but it was peaceful. The kind of place where time slowed down a little. Her living room had a soft blue chair that faced the window, her favorite spot for morning coffee and memories. But beyond that window was something that bothered her, a narrow balcony with chipped paint and nothing but a single folding chair. It stared back at her, empty. Greta wasn't looking to plant a jungle. She just missed feeling connected. Years ago, when she still had a small backyard, she used to grow zinnias. Her husband built her a simple wooden planter, and she filled it every spring like clockwork. I liked watching something grow, she'd say. It reminded me that life still moves. But now? Her hands ached from arthritis. Her back didn't tolerate stooping or bending. And she certainly didn't have space or energy for bags of soil and rows of garden beds. Still, the feeling lingered. That itch to nurture. Not just to fill time, but to fill space with something living, colorful, and hers. One day, while rinsing out a plastic coffee canister, she paused. It was sturdy. It had a lid. It even had a handle. A thought bubbled up, could this be more than trash? And just like that, something sparked. She didn't call herself a gardener anymore. Not really. But she did feel something new that day, like possibility had crept back into the room. That little red container became her first makeshift planter. She poked holes in the bottom with a fork, filled it with leftover potting mix from a neighbor, and tucked in a few basil seeds she had in the cupboard. No plan. No pressure. Just curiosity. Within a week, she saw green. Something inside her softened. Her mornings started to change. Instead of just staring out the window, she opened the door. Watered a little. Smiled a lot. And slowly, that lonely balcony began to look less like concrete. And more like life. Greta likes to say she's not a gardener. She's just someone who needed to grow something, anything, when the world felt still. And maybe that's the beauty of it. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need youth. You don't even need a yard. Just a container. And a reason to care. Do you have a favorite flower or herb that brings you peace? Tell us in the comments, we'd love to know what lights you up. Greta's turning point came not in a garden center, but while rummaging through a recycling bin. It started with that red coffee canister, but soon, her eyes began spotting planters everywhere. The old kitty litter bucket in the closet. The cracked soup pot she couldn't throw away. Even a broken laundry basket with a missing handle. One by one, these forgotten containers found new purpose. She didn't just place them around her balcony, she stacked them. That was the real secret. Greta had stumbled onto a lazy gardener's dream, vertical gardening. Not the fancy, store-bought towers you see in catalogs. No expensive systems. No complicated setups. Just repurposed containers, a few drainage holes, and some smart stacking. She took one sturdy bucket and placed another right on top, after cutting an opening in the bottom for roots to breathe. Then another. And another. Inside each level, she tucked in basil, thyme, pansies, and even cherry tomatoes. The result? A cheerful, climbing tower of green that looked like it came from a magazine. But cost almost nothing. No bending. No hauling heavy bags of soil. She filled each container with a scoop of potting mix, sometimes even mixed with shredded newspaper or compost scraps, and watered from the top. Gravity did the rest. Greta didn't call it gardening. She called it stacking joy. She placed one tower near the balcony railing, where the tomatoes could chase the sun. Another near her chair, so she could reach over and pluck herbs while sipping tea. A third tucked in the corner became home to marigolds that reminded her of her mother's porch in the 1950s. The simplicity was what kept her going. She didn't need to kneel, weed, or drag hoses. She didn't need a green thumb. And yet, life was blooming around her. But what truly surprised her? The way it made her feel. For the first time in years, Greta looked forward to mornings. She'd step outside, breathe in the scent of lemon balm, and smile at a new flower blooming overnight. Those tiny, living towers became more than just a project, they became a reason to get up and move, a quiet ritual that brought her peace, purpose, and pride. And every time a neighbor asked what she was doing, she'd grin and say, "Just stacking a little happiness." Would you try a garden like this if it meant no bending, no weeding, and no yard needed? Let us know in the comments, we want to hear your thoughts. Greta's secret wasn't money or fancy supplies, it was seeing potential in the things everyone else threw away. Her apartment didn't have storage closets bursting with tools or supplies. What she had was imagination. And a habit of saving just-in-case items that most people would toss without a second thought. Take her old paint buckets, for example. Once used for a kitchen remodel years ago, they were collecting dust in the back of a closet. But Greta saw their sturdy shape, their built-in handles, and thought, why not give them one last job? She drilled drainage holes in the bottom, gave them a rinse, and painted them in soft pastels using leftover craft paint from a church project. Those once grimy buckets became bright little homes for lavender, parsley, and even dwarf marigolds. Next came the plastic food containers, ice cream tubs, sour cream cartons, even those big bulk peanut butter jars. Each one got repurposed. Some she left as is and used them for seed starters. Others, she hung along her balcony railing using twine and clothespins, transforming her railing into a miniature hanging garden. One of her proudest hacks? A worn-out metal shoe rack that once sat by the front door. She turned it on its side, fastened it to the balcony railing with zip ties, and suddenly had a vertical shelf perfect for holding rows of small yogurt tubs, each one sprouting a different herb. Oregano. Mint. Chives. The smell alone was worth the effort. And then came her masterpiece. Greta had been holding onto her old aluminum walker. She didn't use it anymore but hadn't brought herself to give it away. One rainy afternoon, she got an idea. She wrapped a wire basket between the handles, added a few hanging mason jars underneath, and tucked basil and thyme into every pocket she could find. By the time she was done, it looked like something out of a fairy tale. She called it her Walker garden. Her daughter called it ridiculously clever. Her neighbors? They started knocking. Asking questions. Smiling more. But what really caught their attention wasn't just how she planted, it was what she planted. Tomatoes the size of plums. Strawberries dangling like ornaments. Tiny cucumbers curling down in spirals from reused kitchen strainers. One neighbor swore Greta's balcony smelled better than the florist down the street. And when a new couple moved into the building, they didn't bring a pie, they brought an empty ice cream tub. Could you show us how to do what you did? So next time you eye an old bucket, a shoe rack, or even an abandoned piece of furniture, pause and think, could this be a future planter? A quiet joy waiting to bloom? What's the most unexpected thing you've repurposed or saved? Tell us below, we'd love to hear your creative twist. Greta had one golden rule when it came to her lazy gardening setup: if it's fussy, it's out. If it grows easy and gives back fast, it's in. She wasn't out to win any gardening awards. What she wanted were plants that made her feel like something was working, without needing constant attention. The kind of plants that almost seemed to thank her for doing the bare minimum. Over time, she discovered 5 absolute favorites. 5 little green miracles that practically thrived on neglect, and brought her joy every single day. 1. Basil. Greta's first love. She started with a tiny handful of seeds in an old coffee can, and in just a few weeks, she had fresh basil bursting with scent. It didn't ask for much, just sunlight and water. And once it took off, it just kept going. She'd pinch off a few leaves and toss them in pasta. Dry them for tea. Even give bunches away to neighbors who came by asking, "Why does it smell like summer up here?" 2. Cherry tomatoes. These were her balcony gems. The little bursts of red that made her whole space feel alive. She loved how they dangled like ornaments from her repurposed railing planters. The best part? She didn't even need to stake them like regular tomatoes. A few sticks, some twine, and they trained themselves upward. And every time she popped one into her mouth, still warm from the sun, she'd smile like a kid again. Store-bought tomatoes don't stand a chance, she liked to say. 3. Mint. Now this was Greta's secret weapon. Mint didn't just grow, it spread. She kept it contained in its own tub, knowing it liked to wander, and it became her go-to for everything. Mint tea in the evening, chopped leaves over fruit, even tucked into her pillow for a calming scent. And when guests came over, they'd always ask, "Where's that fresh smell coming from?" She'd just nod toward the green cascade of leaves by her chair. 4. Lettuce. Lettuce was the plant that surprised her the most. She thought it would be too delicate, too needy. But those cut and come again varieties? Perfect for containers. She grew them in wide tubs along her shoe rack garden, and every morning, she'd snip off a few leaves to toss into a sandwich or salad. No need to wait for a head to form. No mess. Just greens on demand. It made her feel like she was providing something real for herself, every single day. 5. Lavender. Lavender wasn't just a plant. It was a mood. Soft purple blossoms, silvery green leaves, and a scent that turned her tiny balcony into a personal spa. She'd run her fingers through it every morning, then lean back in her chair with a deep breath and think, "This is enough." Lavender became her signal that things were okay. That even small spaces could feel like sanctuaries. But if you asked Greta what her ultimate combo was, what 3 plants changed the game, she'd tell you without hesitation. Basil. Tomato. Marigold. She called them the magic trio. They didn't just look good together. They helped each other. The basil made the tomato sweeter. The marigolds kept pests away from both. And the tomatoes gave the whole little trio a focal point, something red and radiant to tie it all together. "They're like old friends who take care of each other," she'd say. And it's true, when planted together in the same container, they create a tiny ecosystem that thrives with minimal effort. Every time Greta clipped basil for her dinner, plucked a cherry tomato for a snack, or saw a marigold bloom bright orange against the green, she felt something deeper than just satisfaction. She felt pride. Because it wasn't about the food or the flowers. It was about the fact that she made something. With her own hands. In a tiny space. In this chapter of life when so many people tell you what you can't do, she found proof of what she still could. She wasn't just making tea or salad. She was harvesting joy. Which one of these plants would you grow first? Basil, tomatoes, mint, lettuce, or lavender? Drop your answer in the comments, we'd love to know what speaks to you. Greta never set out to change her life. She just wanted something small. A splash of green on a gray balcony. A bit of beauty to look forward to. But something unexpected happened. Each morning, she'd step outside with her cup of tea and check on her little containers. She'd lean in, pinch a basil leaf, brush her hand through the lavender. Without realizing it, she started moving more, stretching, bending, reaching. Little by little, her joints felt less stiff. Her knees didn't creak as loudly. Her hands, once reluctant to grip anything tightly, began to open jars again with ease. "I was exercising," she laughed once, and didn't even know it. That's how sneaky these plants are. But it wasn't just physical. Something was shifting inside her, too. She started humming more. Laughing at small things. Sleeping through the night without waking up tense and restless. The fog that had quietly settled over her during the past few years started to lift. She didn't just feel busy, she felt alive. Neighbors noticed it first. "You're glowing," one said. "You've got more pep in your step," another teased. But the real change came when Greta began talking about her plants like they were friends. Not in a sad, lonely way, more like a proud grandmother who's watched something grow and thrive under her care. She'd tell stories. About the basil that somehow survived that freak summer storm. About the cherry tomato that refused to give up even when the wind knocked over its pot. And about the tiny marigold that bloomed late, weeks after the others, but turned out the brightest of them all. These weren't just plants. They were reminders. Of resilience. Of rebirth. Of the idea that even in a season of life when most people are winding down, you can still grow something beautiful. One afternoon, sitting in her folding chair with dirt under her nails and a big sun hat flopping over her brow, Greta said something that stuck. I didn't just grow plants. I grew out of a rut I didn't even see coming. And that was the truth. Before the garden, her days had started blending together, one long stretch of grayness. After the garden, she had color, texture, rhythm. She felt needed. Even if it was just by a mint plant. And here's the twist, it wasn't the planting that changed her most. It wasn't even the harvesting. It was how she watered them. But we'll get to that in a moment, because the way Greta approached watering her garden might just change the way you look at your mornings. And your mindset. And maybe even your health. You won't believe how simple, and powerful, it is. Greta didn't want to be tied down to a high-maintenance garden. She joked, I'm retired, my plants should be, too. And that's exactly how she treated them. No nagging, no fuss, just a steady rhythm that let both of them thrive without drama. Her secret? A humble plastic bottle. No, really. The kind you'd normally toss into recycling, she gave it a second life. Here's how she did it. She'd take a used water bottle, poke 3 to 4 tiny holes in the bottom using a thumbtack or sewing needle, and bury it upright next to her plants, leaving the neck sticking out of the soil. Then, she'd fill it with water, screw the cap back on loosely, and walk away. That's it. No hoses. No daily watering schedule. Just a slow drip miracle that kept the soil moist exactly where the roots needed it. For the next 3 to 4 days, the plants drank steadily, no overwatering, no dry spells. Just balance. She called them her garden IVs. And it didn't stop there. Greta added one more layer of genius. Every few days, she'd empty her morning coffee grounds into the bottle before filling it with water. Those grounds acted like free, slow-release compost, feeding her plants with nitrogen while perking them up almost as much as her first cup perked her up. No wonder my basil's so bold, she'd laugh. It's caffeinated. This trick made her feel smart, not strained. She didn't have to lug watering cans or worry about missing a day during a rainy week. Her little system did the work while she enjoyed the results. And when visitors asked how she managed to keep everything looking so lush in such a tiny space, she'd wink and say, laziness is the mother of invention. The best part? Even during a heat wave, her plant stayed healthy. The moisture didn't evaporate all at once like it would on the surface. It soaked into the roots, slowly and steadily, just the way plants like it. She even noticed fewer pests. With less surface moisture, fewer bugs came poking around. Her lettuce stayed crisp. Her mint didn't wilt. And her tomatoes. They practically threw her a thank you parade. For someone who once thought gardening required constant effort, Greta discovered the opposite. It was all about smart effort. One-time setups that paid off day after day. So if your knees complain, your hands ache, or you just don't want to hover over your garden like a helicopter parent, Greta's bottle trick might be your best friend. And if you've ever tried something like this, or have your own low-effort watering hack, drop it in the comments. We'd love to learn from you. Because gardening doesn't have to be a chore. It can be a quiet victory. A moment of peace. And, just maybe, your plants will thank you by thriving. Slowly, steadily, and beautifully. You don't need a fancy yard. You don't need a green thumb. You don't even need to know the names of the plants. All you need is a start. One pot. One plant. One quiet decision that today, you're going to grow something, anything. That's exactly how Greta began. No plan. No gardening books. No perfect tools. Just an old soup container from last week's dinner and a basil clipping a neighbor gave her to see if it'd grow. She filled the container with dirt from a bag she found in the discount bin at a hardware store. Poked a hole with her finger. Gently tucked the little stem in. Watered it with her teacup. That was it. That single act didn't change her life overnight. But it did give her something different. A reason to step outside. A reason to check in with something alive. And slowly, it began to give her more than she expected. It gave her confidence. Every new leaf was a tiny success. Every sprout felt like a quiet cheer saying, yes, you're doing something right. That basil plant grew. And so did Greta. One week, she added a small mint cutting. The next month, she had a few cherry tomatoes in recycled yogurt tubs. Before long, her railing was lined with green. Neighbors stopped by just to smell the lavender or grab a few sprigs of rosemary for dinner. She went from unsure to unstoppable. And the funny part? She still doesn't call herself a gardener. She says she's just someone who gives plants a chance. Here's your mental checklist if you're thinking about trying. 1 container, anything that holds soil and drains, poke a few holes if it doesn't. A bit of soil, even a small bag from the store is enough for a handful of plants. A seed, a cutting, or even a grocery store herb, something simple, something forgiving. A little time, 2 minutes a day. Just enough to check in and smile at something growing. That's it. No complicated charts. No strict watering schedules. Just gentle, daily care. And the reward? Far greater than the effort. Because when you grow something, even something tiny, you feel connected. To the day. To the rhythm of life. To the simple truth that you still have the power to create joy. Greta didn't plan to become the woman on the block known for her kitchen garden. She just took one small step. And it changed her mornings, her mood, and the energy in her home. If she can do it, aching joints, zero experience, second floor apartment and all, you absolutely can too. So go ahead. Find that empty pot in the corner. Grab that parsley sprig from your fridge. Turn your maybe into a why not? Then watch what happens. Because sometimes, the smallest starts lead to the biggest shifts. Your space might be small. Your knees might ache. Your hands might not be as steady as they once were. But your heart? Your ability to nurture? Your potential to bring life into even the tiniest corner? That's still limitless. You don't need acres. You don't need energy for hours of work. You just need the will to begin, and the joy that comes from watching something grow. If this story sparked an idea in you, even a tiny one, tap that like button, leave us a comment, and share this with someone who could use a little more peace, purpose, and color in their day. And if you're ready for more uplifting, practical tips to feel better, live fuller, and age like you mean it, subscribe now. We're just getting started.